Games are fun. From Pictionary to Monopoly, Jenga to Clue, from Uno to the game of life, games are fun. What we need to remember is, as fun as games are, real life isn't a game. Life is more than a roll of the dice. The decisions we make in life don't go away after an hour of play and can have long-term effects on us and those around us. So how do we do it? How do we win at the real games of life?
What's the earliest game that you can remember playing as a child? Can you think back that far? I mean, come on, I want you to think back in your mind. What's the earliest game that you can remember playing as a child? If you're with us live right now, I would love for you to jump in the chat and share with everyone who's with you this morning what that game is. Or if you're watching later on YouTube, maybe just leave a comment in the comments section below. But what's the earliest game that you can remember playing as a kid? Now for me, of course, I don't remember the first game I ever played, but I certainly remember one of the earliest games that I played, and it's this one right here. It's Operation. I remember playing this with my friend Jamie. He lived just down the street from us, and I can remember going to his house, and he would bust out this game, and we would operate on this poor fella. We would try to remove these weird objects from his body without, setting off the sensors or without making his nose light up and go red. I mean, we would operate on him and trying to remove these random weird objects that had no business being there, right? Like, an elastic in his leg or a bucket of water in his knee or a dog in his foot. We would try to remove these random objects that had no business being in his life, yet were undeniably or unexplainably present in his life. And that's exactly what I want to talk about today. Today we're in part 3 of this 5-part series called The Games of Life. And for the last few weeks, we've been looking at different games and at the end of the day saying, life is more than a roll of the dice. That each one of us only get one shot at this one and only life. And last week, Tyler did an incredible job talking to us about the trivial pursuits in our lives. And after all of our services were over, I so badly wanted to encourage him. I wanted to give him a hug. I wanted to look him in the eye. I wanted to tell him how proud of him I was and how great of a job that he did. But sadly, I had to settle for a text message. And that's happening so much these days, especially with Tyler. Just a couple of weeks ago, Tyler and his girlfriend Vanessa FaceTimed Lisa and I to tell us that they had gotten engaged. I guess quarantine will do that to you, right? Desperate times call for desperate measures. But we were so excited for them. We wanted to jump through the screen. We wanted to hug them. We wanted to celebrate with them. We wanted to take them out for dinner. We wanted to bring the whole staff team over and just celebrate with them. This is the happiest moment in their life. We just wanted to have so much fun. But sadly, that too was taken from us. Or more importantly, it was taken from them. They deserved to celebrate. They deserved to celebrate with their family and with their friends. This was the happiest moment of their life. Vanessa deserved to kind of dangle her ring out in front of all of her friends and all of her girlfriends, ooh and ah. But that too was taken from her. And it seems like the longer these days go, the longer this present reality lingers, the more that's being taken from us. And there's a sense in which, if I could be honest, if I could just be honest with you this morning, there's a sense in which we're being robbed while we're still in our house, right? There's things that are being taken from us, and it's as if we're powerless to do anything about it. My daughter Emma lives northwest of Toronto, and once a month she comes home to be with us. But it's been almost 3 months since I've seen her. It's been 3 months. In fact, it's getting harder and harder every day. In fact, 2 weeks ago, it was Emma's 14th birthday, and I wasn't there. Sure, we did everything that we could to make the day special. We tried to make it memorable. We sent her some birthday presents, and we sent her a package with, a birthday cake mix and some frosting and sprinkles and 14 candles. And we had the same materials here. And so over FaceTime, Em and I, we made the same, birthday cake. And then I cut it all up and I took pieces of it to all of our family across the city. And then we Zoom called, don't you love Zoom these days? Well, we Zoom called Emma for a birthday party and we sang her the song and we watched her blow out the candles. But it wasn't what it was supposed to be. There was a screen between us. And I couldn't reach out and touch her. I couldn't hold her. I couldn't hug her. I couldn't kiss her. I couldn't look her in the eye and tell her how proud of her and how proud I am of this young woman that she is and is becoming. I couldn't explain to her why her birthday wasn't what it was supposed to be. And we're never going to get the chance to to do it again. Her 14th birthday was taken from her. And as her dad, there was nothing I could do about it. And it broke my heart to know that her heart was broken. And there was nothing that I could do about it. And as badly as I wanted to, as much as I wanted, I couldn't reach through the screen and operate and remove those things that had no business being in her heart or being in her mind. I was powerless. There was nothing I could do. And my guess is you know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe you feel alone, or maybe you are alone. Maybe you're alone in a hospital room right now. Or maybe someone you love is in a hospital room right now and you can't be with them. Or sadly, maybe you've lost someone and now you have to grieve that you can't even grieve in a normal way. And birthday parties are becoming drive-by honk sessions. And like me, you're watching your kids miss out and there's nothing you can do about it and you can't explain it and they don't understand, nor should they. Your prom dress is hanging up in the closet and you're not sure if you're going to get to wear it. And graduation isn't going to be what graduation was supposed to be. And even though you may want to go to college, you're not sure if you're going to get to go to college this fall. Maybe you've had to cancel, or maybe you've had to postpone a wedding. Or maybe somebody canceled your job. And social distancing has eliminated your ability to earn an income for you and your family. Or maybe you're working from home. I mean, you're still working, but you're working from home, and now you're trying to juggle working from home and managing your kids, and it doesn't feel like you're doing either very well. Or maybe like me, you can't be with your kids. Or maybe you can't be with your grandkids. Or maybe you just had a baby that nobody can see. And it's the happiest moment in your life, and you can't share it the way you should with the people that you wish you could. And no matter what it is, the truth is, all of us are experiencing loss. All of us are experiencing loss. And what these days are showing us is that as different and as unique and as individual as we all are, at the root of who we are, we all have some things in common. And even though the what may differ, all of us are experiencing loss. And my concern for you today, no matter what that loss is, or no matter how many losses you're experiencing, my concern for you today is the impact those losses are having on your heart. Because everything that you are and everything that you do comes from your heart. And I think that's why Solomon, the wisest man, Solomon, said to be the wisest man who ever lived, I think that's why he wrote these words. Here's what he said. He said, above all else, meaning above everything else that you can do, he said, guard your heart, for everything that you do flows from it. Everything that you are, everything that you do flows from your heart, and so you need to guard it. But see, for you, maybe guarding your heart isn't what you think it is. For you, guarding your heart may be dismissing the impact or the effects these days are having on you or those that you love, or the losses that you're experiencing. And you think that just by dismissing it, by just kind of pushing it away, by shrugging it off, just by focusing on the positive, that somehow you won't be infected or affected by what these days are doing and what they're taking from you. And so you think, if I just dismiss it, if I just shrug it off, I'll be okay. But the truth is, my guess is, if you were to think about it long enough, those losses might bring you to tears. And somehow you know it, so you just try to push on. You just think, I just got to dismiss it. I just got to keep my head high. For others, maybe you're diminishing it. You're diminishing the losses by comparing your circumstances to the circumstances of other people. And when people say, hey, how you doing? You're like, oh, we're not doing too great, but at least we're not like, or it could be so much worse, we could be. And so you think somehow I'll just diminish the effects these days are having on me. And that somehow you think that guarding your heart is actually putting your heart in a box. It's like playing this game, and instead of having all these things exposed, you think if I just keep everything in the box, that somehow I'll just pretend that it's not affecting me. But the only way these items are removed in this game is by exposing them, not keeping them covered up. But somehow for many of us, we think if I just dismiss or if I just diminish the impact or the effects of what's happening to me or what's happening around me, I'll be okay. And yet you say you're okay. You may think that you're okay, when in reality you find yourself, your fuse is getting shorter and shorter. You're becoming increasingly more and more frustrated. You're reacting disproportionately to situations and circumstances. Maybe you're lashing out in anger. And if you don't see it in yourself, maybe you see it in your kids. You see your kids and their fuse is short and they're becoming increasingly frustrated and they can't express or they can't explain why. And you think, man, they just need to get out of the house, when in reality, What's in their heart is what needs to get out. But they don't know how. And everything that you do flows from your heart. And Solomon said, so you have to guard it. And it's not done by dismissing, and it's not done by diminishing. You have to expose what needs to be removed in order to do something about it. And this is only amplified if you're a Christian, right? I mean, if you're a Christian, if you're a follower of Jesus, you say, well, God is good. I just need to keep the faith. I just need to keep focused on the positive because God is in control and God is faithful. And somehow if I just stay positive and I just, allow myself to focus on what is as opposed to being sad by what it is I've lost, if I can just keep the faith, if I can just be strong, God's in control, God is good, God is at work, God is going to work out all things for good. God works all things for good for those that love the Lord. I believe that. And I believe that too. But what I want to suggest to you is that no matter what you believe, no matter what it is you believe, you still need to grieve. No matter what you believe, you still need to grieve. And I think one of the best illustrations of this comes from a moment in Jesus' life, a moment that you may already be aware of. In fact, when I begin to share this story, my guess is you may already know how it's going to end. But what I'd like you to do is what I've often asked you to do, and that's just to slow your mind and allow yourself to experience this moment with the characters that we're about to read about. We're going to pick it up, and it says, now a man named Lazarus was sick. That's how the story begins. A man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. So all three of these characters have a special relationship with Jesus. He's been in their home. They've supported him financially. And so the sisters, when their brother becomes sick, so the sisters sent word to Jesus. So their brother is sick and they send word. They send a messenger to find Jesus. He may have been 2, 3, maybe 4 days away by foot. But they send this message off to Jesus. And here's the message they send. Lord, the one you love is sick. Now this is so dramatic. It's not Lord, Lazarus is sick. It's Lord, the one that you love is sick. These women know that they can just describe Lazarus as the one that he loves, and he'll know who they're talking about because of the unique relationship they had. Now, Jesus had healed many, many people. He'd healed many, many strangers. In fact, he healed people that he only had met maybe one time. And in some cases, he healed people that he had never even met. He just spoke the words. He wasn't even with them and they were healed. I mean, he had healed all kinds of people. So of course, in this moment, when their brother is sick with this life-threatening illness, of course, these friends of Jesus send word for Jesus, right? They send this word. So when he heard this, when he heard the message, so it got to him, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. So in other words, Jesus in this moment, he's saying, look, there's a kind of glory that's found when you go through really negative experiences, whether it's sickness, whether it's illness, whether it's disease, that there is a glory found when we go through these difficult seasons of our life, which to all of us, we're like, well, yay. Right? But what Jesus is saying in this moment, if you read between the lines, he's saying there is a purpose for everything that's about to happen. And Jesus understands and knows exactly what that purpose is. So now Jesus loved Mary and her sister and Lazarus. So Jesus loved these three people so much. I mean, and what you need to understand in this moment is this isn't just some family he met once. This is a family that he has an intimate relationship with. He knows them. He knows their names. He knows where they live. He's been in their homes. They've supported him, right? There's a unique relationship between Jesus and this family. And in light of that unique relationship, watch what happens. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And I read that right. That's not a typo. Jesus did the exact opposite of what you and I would expect him to do in light of the relationship he had with these people. He didn't rush off to heal him. In fact, everything that he does in this moment just feels plain wrong. I mean, in fact, it's infuriating. It just strikes you as wrong, wrong, wrong. I mean, Jesus gets word not that someone somewhere is sick. Jesus gets word that Lazarus, the one that he loved, is sick. And he says to the messenger, hey, thanks, I appreciate you giving me the message. And his disciples probably start to get up and they're packing their bags. And Jesus is like, well, where are you guys going? Sit back down. We're not going anywhere. And they're like, oh, okay. And he just sits down and does nothing for 2 days. And I guarantee you felt like that in your life, haven't you? where you've called out to God, you've cried out to God, God, I need you. God, I need you to do something. God, I need you to intervene in this situation. God, help me. God, I need you to work. I need you to move. I need you to do something. And then nothing happens and you're like, God, are you listening? God, are you out there? God, do you care? And then you start to bargain with God. God, I'll do anything. I'll go back to church. I'll give some money. I'll let my kids be missionaries. God, I'll do whatever it takes. God, I just need you to move in this moment. And Jesus has done nothing for 2 days. And after 2 days of no movement, 2 days of staying put and doing nothing, 2 days of Mary and Martha suffering, 2 days of Mary and Martha watching their brother suffer and their hearts being broken as they watch their brother die. And then Jesus, for 2 days, he allows nothing to happen. He allows this to go on in their lives. But he seems to think that he knows exactly why that is. It's so that the Son may be glorified. So he has a plan. He has a purpose for their pain. And then, after these days, he then said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. So after days of inactivity, after days of doing nothing, Jesus says to his disciples, okay guys, pack up. It's time to go. Get your stuff. We're on the road. Why? Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. So it's like, well, wait a minute. How does he know that he's asleep? I don't know. He's Jesus, I guess. They just got used to him saying weird things that they didn't understand. But his disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. They say to him, they don't know how he knows he's asleep, but they're like, this is great news, Jesus. If he's asleep, that means he's going to get better. That means the fever has broken. He's resting calmly. This is great news. Jesus, we don't even need to go. But Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought that he meant natural sleep. In other words, the disciples in this moment are like the disciples often were. If you read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the disciples rarely got what Jesus was telling them. Right? So they think that he's talking about, natural sleep. So Jesus told them plainly, as he often did when he got annoyed, he just said, Lazarus is dead. And they're thinking, what? First of all, how do you know that he's dead? But he's dead. Well, if he's dead, well, why didn't we go? And so now there's all this drama. Now there's all this confusion, and they're thinking to themselves, well, wait a minute, Jesus. You love Lazarus. You love Martha. You love Mary. This family's done everything that they could for us. And you knew that Lazarus was sick. 2 days ago you found out he was sick and you did nothing. In fact, you told us to sit back down and now you're telling us that he's dead. Why didn't we go from the very beginning? And as if they weren't confused enough, what Jesus says next just pushes them over the edge. He said, and for your sake, Jesus said, I'm glad I was not there. For your sake, I'm glad I was not there. To which I want to say, well, what about Lazarus' sake? What about Mary's sake? What about Martha's sake? I'm glad I wasn't there. And he says to the disciples, and you got to get this. This is huge. He says to these 12 young men who he in just a little while is going to hand the keys to this whole thing over to. These young men who were constantly running around and they were terrified at sea and they never got what he said and they would deny him later. Jesus says to these young men, for your sake, for the 12 of you, for your sake, I'm glad I wasn't there. Jesus looks at these young men and says, for your sake, I'm glad that he's passed away. For your sake, I'm glad that Mary and Martha had to watch their brother die. For your sake, I'm glad that their hearts are broken. For your sake. I'm glad for the mystery surrounding this whole thing. I'm glad for the disappointment that they have in me. I'm glad for all the Jews that are around Mary and Martha right now saying, see, we told you he's not who he said he was. We told you that he wouldn't come. For all of this, I'm glad because I have something so big, something so major, something so overarching that I want you to learn in this moment. And it's so important for me to teach you and for you to learn what I'm about to teach you in this moment that I'm willing for one that I love to die. And I'm willing for those that I love for their hearts to be broken because what I'm about to teach you is so incredibly important. And for your sake, Jesus looked at these men and said, for your sake, I'm glad I was not there. And then he says a little Greek word that's translated into English into two words, so that. Now this is called a henna clause. It's this little Greek word henna that means now I'm going to give you the reason. Now I'm going to give you the purpose. Now I'm going to let you in on what's really going on. You want to know why I'm glad I was not there? You want to know why I had you sit back down? You want to know why I allowed Lazarus to die and for Mary and Martha's hearts to be broken and for their faith to be reduced to ashes? You want to know why? I allowed all of that, and I'm glad that it happened so that you may believe. So that you may believe. To which the disciples probably said, if they're anything like me, they probably looked at him and said, wait a minute, Jesus. I mean, I know faith is important in everything. I mean, I know faith is important, but are you really telling us that faith and our faith is so important to you that you're willing to let someone you love, someone whose name you know, someone whose home you've been in, you're willing to allow them to die? And you're willing to allow their sisters to become heartbroken while they watch their brother to die? You're willing to let all that happen for our faith? Is it really that big a deal to you, Jesus? I mean, come on, does it really matter that much? Is it really that important to you? To which Jesus would say, yeah. Wait a minute, Jesus. Okay, so you're like telling us that you set this whole thing up to develop our belief in you? Yeah. Is it really that important, Jesus? Yes. Is it really that big a deal? Yes. Okay, Jesus, let me think about this another. Are you telling us that you're willing to sacrifice them so that something about us would be developed and grown in terms of the way that we view you? And Jesus would say, yes. Okay. So they're so confused. And I would be too. So would you. And so then we skip down to verse 21. And so Martha has been, on the side of the road. She's been waiting and watching for Jesus. They've taken turns back and forth, one looking after Lazarus, one at the road. And so eventually Martha sees Jesus off in the distance. And so she runs out to him and she falls to her knees and she's in tears. And in this moment, she says something to Jesus that I'm sure that you've said to God at some point in your life or another. You may be a Christian, you may not be a faith person, but I guarantee in some way, shape, or form, you've said something like this to God at some point in your life. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. In other words, Jesus, this is your fault. Jesus, I've seen you heal strangers. I've seen you heal people that weren't even in your presence. I've seen you heal people that were undeserving. Jesus, I heard of a day where a Roman centurion came to you. A Roman centurion. I mean, come on. I mean, it just makes me itchy just to even say the words. A Roman centurion, the enemies of Rome, a representative of a government that we despise. A Roman centurion came to you and asked you to heal their servant. You didn't know the centurion, you didn't know the servant, but you healed him, and yet you wouldn't come here and heal your friend whom you love. It's your fault that he's died. You could have done something about it. And if you had been here, I wouldn't have had to watch my brother die. If you had been here, you could have done something about this. And if you had been here, I wouldn't have had to answer all those people who said, where's Jesus? Where's Jesus? I thought he was your friend. I thought he was your friend. You could have done something about this, Jesus. And the worst part about the whole thing isn't just that I had to watch my brother die. It's that I had to watch him die knowing that you could have done something about it. And if you had been here, this wouldn't have happened, and you didn't come. And despite all of the pain and all the anger that she's feeling in this moment, then she says something that is so incredibly amazing. She says, but I know, meaning I believe, I trust, I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. So she's saying, I've watched and here's what I know. I mean, as angry as I am and as brokenhearted as I am right now, I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. God will give you whatever you ask. And that's why I called for you when my brother became sick. God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Your brother will rise again. And she's like, yeah, I know. I know that. I know what you're trying to say. And then she reaches into her theology box and she pulls out this thing that every Jew believed. In fact, it's something that you may believe. She said, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. It's like, yeah, Jesus, we say that at every funeral. I mean, everybody knows this. We're all going to see one another again. We said it at my cousin's funeral. We say it at every funeral, that someday we're all going to be together again. You know, the dead in Christ will rise, and we're all going to be, you know, we're all going to go to heaven, and we're all going to be there. And Moses and Abraham and Isaac, they're all going to be there. And it's going to be this big autograph session. You know, we're going to run around to, you know, all the celebrities of the Old Testament getting autographs. I mean, it's going to be this amazing thing. And it's not that I don't believe all of that, Jesus, but you could have prevented this from happening now. And it's not that I don't believe in a resurrection and all that. And Jesus then cuts her off. And Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Yes, even now God could give me whatever it is that I ask, but it's so much bigger than that. And yes, you're right that I'm a teacher from God, and it's so much bigger than that. And yes, you're right that I'm a miracle worker and can do amazing things, but it's so much bigger than that. In this moment, he's saying, I am the resurrection and I am the life. Now, you don't make a claim like that you can't back up, but that's absolutely what this moment is all about. And he says, the one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And he says, do you believe this? So Jesus is in this moment, he's saying, I'm making a statement. I'm proclaiming something that I have not claimed up until this moment. I am resurrection. I am life. And he's saying, do you believe this? This is so much bigger than just kind of this moment. This is about you. This is about your faith. This is about your sister and her faith. And this isn't just about you. This is about people who are going to live thousands of years from now, who are going to look back on this moment in time in the midst of them enduring a global pandemic. And they're going to look back in this moment and they're going to see what happens in this moment. It's going to fuel their faith in the midst of their moments. Do you believe this? Do you believe this? This is about your faith. This is about your confidence in me. And I'm wanting to develop that faith. I'm wanting to develop that confidence. And what lengths am I willing to go to develop that faith, develop that belief, develop that confidence? This is the length, Jesus would say. This is the length that I'm willing to go. To which you might be saying, well, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm a pastor. I'm not comfortable with it either. But this is what Jesus did. Jesus in this moment, this is how important your faith and my faith is to our God. That he's willing to leverage painful circumstances to deepen our trust and deepen our faith. And he says to Martha, do you believe this? Do you believe it? She says, yes, Lord, she replied. Takes a deep breath. Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God who is to come into the world. Now I believe in this moment she's got tears streaming down her face and she says, Jesus, I believe it, even though you let my brother die. And I believe it, even though you didn't come. And I believe it, Jesus, even though you didn't answer my prayer. And Jesus, I believe it, even though I had to endure all the scorn and all the spite of all those people who openly mocked me because I claimed that you loved us and that you would come to help my brother. I believe it, even though I have very little to hang that belief on. And see, this is the preeminent way of honoring God. It's where you get to that place where you say, God, I believe, and God, I trust, even though I have very little to hang that belief or that trust on. And she says, I believe. Wow, it's amazing. And so then Jesus does something really odd. He asks to be taken to the grave. And so he's escorted there and he stands outside Lazarus' tomb with all of the other mourners. And then we get down to verse 35 and we read two words. It's the shortest verse in the entire Bible. And in light of everything that we've just said, I mean, in light of the fact that Jesus knew that he had purpose for all of the pain, that Jesus had perspective for all of the pain, that he was working, that he had a plan. He didn't just show up late for some reason. He had purpose for everything that had happened, or in some cases, everything that hadn't happened up until that moment. But he knew why he was here in this moment. And he was confident that the timing was perfect. But in this moment, we're about to read, in light of all that, we're about to read two of the most counterintuitive, but yet the two most comforting words in all of Scripture. Jesus wept. Jesus wept. Why? Why? I mean, this is my favorite verse in the entire Bible because here's the clash. I mean, here's the world that we live in, right? I mean, Jesus, the miracle worker, Jesus who can do incredible, amazing things, Jesus who knows what's about to happen and why it's about to happen, Jesus knowing all of the purpose for all of the pain, Jesus knowing that everything is going to work out, and as we're about to see, everything will work out in the end. Jesus knowing it all still stopped to weep. Why? Why would he weep in this moment? I mean, he knows what he's about to do and why he's about to do it. Jesus knows in this moment that everything's about to work out. So why in the world would he shed a single tear? Why? It's because believing it will all work out in the end doesn't eliminate the need for grief in the moment. Believing, in Jesus' case, knowing it will all work out in the end doesn't eliminate the need for grief in the moment. Jesus knows what's about to happen and why it's about to happen when it's about to happen, but he still stops to grieve. And it's as if in this moment he says, look, I understand. It hurts to lose. And it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't even matter what, in his case, you know. But you need to grieve in those moments of loss. And it doesn't matter what you know. It matters that in that moment that you release what it is in your heart, the grief that's in your heart. You can't just dismiss it and diminish it. You can't just put a box over it and pretend that it's not there and think that if I don't address it, it'll just somehow go away. Jesus in that moment modeled to us the importance of grieving in the moment. And as if he says to you, and it's as if he says to me, look, I understand. And I know what you don't know. He knows what Mary and Martha don't know, but he feels exactly what Mary and Martha feel. And he says to you, he says to me, it hurts to lose. And you have to allow yourself to express what it is you've lost and release what it is you feel in your heart, regardless of what you believe or what you know. And so then Jesus does this really weird thing. He says to Mary and Martha, he says, I want you to have your servants remove the stone. And now Jesus, would later be placed in a tomb, and Lazarus is placed in this moment in a similar tomb. And so he says to Mary and Martha, look, I want you to have your guys remove the stone. And they're thinking, well, what in the world? Like, why would we do that? I mean, Jesus, he's been in there for 4 days. I mean, you didn't just miss the funeral, Jesus. I mean, you really missed it. I mean, you're really late. Now, this isn't fashionably late thing. I mean, you're late. And it's interesting, if you read in the King James Version in this moment, the women say to him, Lord, at this time, his body would stinketh, and yeseth it wouldeth, right? I mean, if he's been in there for 4 days, whether he's been embalmed or not, in this moment, his body is going to stinketh. Jesus says, look, I don't care. I want you to move the stone. And so the servants do it. They move the stone. I mean, it's this dramatic moment. And then Jesus, looks up to heaven and he prays. And it's basically like he looks up, and this isn't what he said. I mean, you can read it for yourself later, but it's basically, I think he closes his eyes and he says, okay, God, you know what I'm about to do, and I know what I'm about to do. And the only reason I'm really talking to you right now is in this moment is because I want them to see that you and I have this special connection. I don't want them to mistake for one moment that I'm doing this in and of myself or my own power. And so if they're watching us right now, God, they're going to see that we have this special connection and that you are the one that has given me the power over death, and that this is all done for you and it's all your will. And so God, I just want them to see that. And maybe he opened his eyes and looked around, and kind of said, okay, are they watching us? They're seeing that this is going on. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, we're good. And then he opens his eyes and he looks into the tomb and he says, Lazarus. Now, I don't know if he yelled it. I don't know if he whispered it. I don't know if they had to lean in and kind of say, like, what did he say? I don't know exactly how he said it, but what I do know is what he said. He said, Lazarus, come forth. And the Bible tells us, but better yet, Mary and Martha tell us, and John, the gospel writer, tells us, the eyewitnesses tell us that Lazarus came out of the tomb alive. And if they were questioning, or if you and I are questioning in that moment, if he's the resurrection and the life, I mean, all the loopholes to that argument in that moment are closed. They're closed. And then if we jump down to the end of the story in verse 45, it says, therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did, they put their faith in him. Jesus didn't just simply leverage a painful situation. He created one so that they would believe. And they did. It worked out exactly how he had planned. The purpose for their pain in this moment were put into perspective. But yet, Jesus wept. Why? Why? Because believing it will all work out in the end doesn't eliminate the need for grief in the moment. Jesus knew that it would all work out. Jesus knew why things had happened the way they had and what he was doing in the midst of it. And in the end, it worked out exactly as he had planned, but he still wept. Because it's not enough to dismiss or diminish what it is that's happening to you or what's happening around you. And even knowing how things or believing or being confident that things are going to work out in the end does not eliminate the need for grief in the moment. Whatever it is that your heart is experiencing has to be released. And you may think you're guarding your heart by putting a lid over it, putting it back in the box, or by dismissing or by diminishing things that are happening, and you compare your circumstance to other people. You may think that you're taking, the protection, you're guarding your heart in that moment, when in reality, you're keeping your heart from having an opportunity to release what needs to be released. And Jesus wept, even though he knew that it would all work out in the end. And you need to do the same. And so do I. No matter what you believe, you still need to grieve. You may believe that God is at work in this moment. You may believe that it's all going to work out in the end. You may believe that life is going to go back to normal in the not too distant future. And I believe those things too. But regardless of what you believe, you still need to grieve. And the temptation in these days is to dismiss and to diminish the effects and the impacts these days are having on our hearts. And we think that if I just keep my head high, and if I just focus on the positive, and if I just kind of brush things off and compare, at least I'm not in that situation and things could be so much worse. Listen, that's not guarding your heart. Guarding your heart is opening it up and allowing what's really in your heart an opportunity to be released. You don't play this game. You don't help this poor fella by keeping him in the box. You have to open your heart in order to guard it. And you have to give yourself permission to grieve. You need to give yourself permission to acknowledge what it is you've lost. Stop comparing and stop dismissing. Allow yourself to acknowledge what it is you've lost. Allow yourself to express, allow yourself to show and reveal what it is that's being lost so that you can have the opportunity to remove those things that shouldn't be in your heart. And you can process them. So you don't guard your heart by covering it up. You guard your heart by opening it.